The sand crunched beneath her armored boots as she stepped into the center of the arena, her sword gleaming under the pale sunlight that filtered through the open dome. The roar of the crowd thundered against the stone pillars, a living wall of noise that battered at her composure. She kept her chin high, her eyes steady, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. Her name had once been chanted in victory. Now they waited for her fall. Across the arena, her opponent emerged. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed unnatural, his violet skin shimmering like polished stone. Intricate golden armor clung to his lean frame, emphasizing strength without sacrificing speed. His eyes, black and fathomless, locked onto hers with a look that was neither hatred nor disdain, but something colder, an utter absence of emotion. He carried no weapon, his body itself was the blade. She tightened her grip on her sword. Pride was a dangerous thing, she had been warned, but it had fueled her ascent from obscurity to champion. It burned inside her even now, defying the king's decree that had condemned her to this spectacle. She would not bow. She would not break. The horn sounded. She lunged forward, fast and low, the tip of her blade aimed straight for his chest. A strike to end it quickly, to silence the jeers before they could grow. But he moved before she could blink, tilting his body with an elegant pivot. Her sword cut nothing but air. Off balance, she spun, correcting too late. His hand brushed her shoulder, gentle, almost a caress, and she was sent stumbling several steps backward, gasping from the force. The crowd laughed. Not a roar of amusement, but a cruel, snickering chorus that made her ears burn. She snarled low in her throat, lifting her sword again. No more mercy. No more hesitation. Again she charged, this time feinting left before striking right, a maneuver that had felled dozens before him. Yet he saw it coming, sidestepping easily and delivering a sharp tap to her gauntlet with 2 fingers. Her hand spasmed. The sword clattered from her grasp, hitting the dirt with a pathetic thud. She stared at it stunned. In the royal box high above, the king leaned forward in his throne, a smirk barely concealed behind jeweled fingers. She could feel his satisfaction, thick and suffocating as the heat rising off the sands. She dove for her weapon, but the alien warrior was already there. With a single fluid motion, he kicked it across the arena floor, far beyond her reach. She scrambled to her feet, chest heaving, fists clenched. Unarmed, humiliated, and exposed. Her mind raced. Fight with your hands? Endure. Endure until you find an opening. The warrior approached slowly, giving her every chance to surrender. She refused. She crouched low, ready to spring, ignoring the ache in her shoulder where he had first struck. He stopped an arm's length away and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect she did not know how to interpret. She attacked, throwing every ounce of her strength into a brutal punch aimed for his jaw. He caught her wrist easily, almost lazily, and twisted. She fell to one knee with a sharp cry, the world spinning around her. Before she could recover, his foot swept her legs out from under her, sending her sprawling flat on her back. The crowd's laughter swelled, savage and merciless. Gritting her teeth, she rolled to her feet. Blood trickled from her split lip. Her body screamed in protest, but her spirit, stubborn as ever, refused to yield. She wiped the blood away with the back of her hand and faced him again. For a moment, something flickered across his impassive face. Regret? Pity? It vanished before she could be sure. He moved again, faster than before. She barely registered his approach before his palm struck her chest with an open-handed blow. Pain bloomed through her ribs. She stumbled back several paces, struggling to draw breath. Her armor, the once proud symbol of her invincibility, cracked along the breastplate with a faint, ominous sound. Another cheer from the stands. Another piece of her pride ripped away. The warrior stood still, giving her space, daring her to rise again. Through blurred vision, she saw the king rise to his feet, arms raised in victory that was not his. She could imagine his voice booming out, declaring her broken, a warning to anyone else who might challenge his rule. Her knees buckled. She caught herself with trembling hands. She could taste dust and humiliation on her tongue. And yet, somewhere deep inside, under the wreckage of pride and pain, a flame stubbornly flickered. Not yet, she thought. Not today. She rose, slow and unsteady but standing nonetheless. The warrior inclined his head once more, acknowledging her resilience. The king's smirk faltered. The horn sounded again, signaling the end of the first round. The alien warrior stepped back without striking. She straightened, battered but alive, heart pounding with something fierce and stubborn. The battle was not over, and neither was she. The second horn's blare cut through the heavy air like a blade, commanding them back into motion. She rolled her bruised shoulders, ignoring the sharp pangs that lanced down her spine. Her armor, cracked and battered, hung awkwardly against her frame, a pitiful echo of the once immaculate plating that had been forged for victory, not survival. The crowd's excitement rippled through the arena, a living tide of expectation eager to see her crumble. Her opponent stood untouched, serene as a mountain before a storm. His violet skin gleamed under the fractured light, the golden etchings of his armor catching each beam and scattering it into the dust-choked air. He did not advance. He waited. Watching her with those void-black eyes, he offered no mockery, no disdain, only silent, relentless patience. It was worse than gloating. It was as if she no longer posed a threat worth extinguishing. Every instinct screamed at her to charge, to fight with the ferocity that had carved her legend into the bones of the kingdom. Pride demanded it. But survival whispered another truth: rage had betrayed her once already. Now it would only hasten her fall. She circled him carefully, feet sliding across the loose sand, looking for an opening. Her fingers itched for the familiar weight of her sword, now abandoned somewhere behind him, a relic of the warrior she had been. Without it, she felt naked, a child playing at war. The alien shifted, and she reacted instantly, lunging in a low, desperate arc, aiming to drive her shoulder into his midsection. He spun away like smoke, the momentum carrying her past him, stumbling. Before she could recover, a precise blow struck the small of her back. She crashed into the ground face first, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. The cheers that followed were deafening. She pushed up on trembling arms, spitting blood and sand. Her vision swam. Her thoughts fractured, a storm of shame and desperation. She barely saw him approaching again until his shadow swallowed hers. In a single motion, he reached down and seized the front of her ruined breastplate, lifting her to her feet as easily as a man might pluck a feather from the ground. His strength was effortless, almost casual. She met his gaze, defiance still burning in her battered body. For a heartbeat neither moved. Then, with a sudden, brutal yank, he tore the breastplate free, casting it aside like broken armor from a fallen knight. The crowd roared approval, their bloodlust ignited. Exposed and heaving for breath, she swayed on her feet, heart pounding in her ears. The cool air struck her bruised skin, a humiliating reminder of how far she had fallen. Once she had entered this arena wrapped in steel and legend. Now she stood vulnerable, stripped of the symbols of her power. The alien warrior did not strike. He simply lowered his hand and stepped back, granting her a final choice: submit or continue. She straightened slowly, pain crackling through every nerve. Her fists clenched. Her pride screamed for vengeance, for some blow, any blow, to reclaim the dignity slipping like water through her fingers. With a guttural cry, she rushed him. He sidestepped smoothly, his hand flickering out with inhuman speed. A sharp impact exploded against her side. She gasped, ribs splintering under the precision of the strike. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the sand, clutching her side, vision blackening at the edges. The jeers of the crowd faded into a distant, hollow roar, like waves crashing on a shore she could no longer reach. From somewhere beyond the haze of pain, she saw the king rise from his throne. His crimson robes billowed in the rising wind, arms stretched wide in triumph. His smile was a blade sharper than any sword. Her opponent stood over her, silent and immovable. He offered no hand of mercy, no final blow. His task was complete. She had been broken, not in body, but in spirit, just as the king had commanded. But as she lay there, her pride shattered around her like glass, a deeper truth took root in her mind. This was never about victory. Not for her. Not for him. It had been about spectacle, about dominance. About reminding the world that defiance bore consequences no strength could shield against. A low, shuddering breath escaped her lips. Beneath the pain, beneath the shame, a new kind of fire began to kindle. Smaller, colder, but infinitely more dangerous. She pushed herself onto one elbow, ignoring the fresh stab of agony that shot through her side. The king's expression flickered, just briefly, as if her refusal to stay down unsettled him. Good, she thought. The horn sounded once more, signaling the end of the second round. She did not collapse when it ended. She did not crawl. She knelt, spine straight despite the broken armor and bruised flesh, staring up at her enemy, not in supplication, but in silent, gathering resolve. The alien warrior watched her with unreadable eyes. A faint, almost imperceptible nod passed between them, a wordless acknowledgement that this battle was not truly between them, but against something far greater. The king's celebration dimmed, just a little. The scent of blood and sweat clung to her skin as she knelt in the dust, her body screaming in protest with every shallow breath. The second round had ended, but the echoes of the battle still pulsed through her bones. She did not look toward the king's box, though she could feel his gaze pressing down on her like a heavy hand, expectant, hungry for her final collapse. She would not give it to him. Slowly, she pushed herself to her feet. The movement was sluggish, weighed down by exhaustion, by the brutal ache radiating from her ribs. Her armor lay in shattered pieces around her, exposed flesh mottled with bruises and streaks of dried blood. She should have felt vulnerable, humiliated beyond recovery, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer grasping desperately at pride. Pride had abandoned her the moment her breastplate hit the sand. What remained now was something colder, sharper. The alien warrior stood a few paces away, his posture as unreadable as ever. His hands were relaxed, his breathing even, as if this battle had cost him nothing. But beneath the stillness, there was something else, an awareness, a recognition. He was watching her not as an opponent, but as something yet unfinished. A question still waiting to be answered. The third horn sounded. She did not rush him this time. She did not lunge with blind fury or reckless desperation. Instead, she shifted her stance, grounding herself, drawing from the lessons buried beneath years of arrogance. Speed and power had failed her. This fight was no longer about proving anything. It was about surviving. The warrior inclined his head, almost imperceptibly, before moving. He struck first, a blur of motion that her eyes barely tracked. But this time, she was ready. She twisted, evading the brunt of the blow, though pain still flared as his fist clipped her shoulder. She used the momentum, letting it carry her into a roll before springing up again, steady, breathing hard but still standing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was small, almost lost beneath the roars of those still hoping to see her final defeat. But she had heard it. So had he. He attacked again, testing her. His strikes were swift, merciless, but she no longer met them with brute force. She moved with them, redirecting, deflecting, not as a predator seeking dominance but as something more elusive, more dangerous. She was no longer fighting to win. She was fighting to last. Minutes passed in a deadly rhythm, attack, evade, counter, endure. Sweat stung her eyes, her limbs trembled with fatigue, but still, she fought. The crowd's cheers became uncertain, their amusement thinning into something else. Confusion. Frustration. She was supposed to fall. She wasn't falling. The king shifted in his seat, his smirk fading at the edges. The alien warrior stepped back, studying her, his breathing heavier now. The impassivity in his dark eyes had lessened, replaced by something almost like intrigue. Then, he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. A hush fell over the arena. She stared at it, her own hands clenched at her sides. It was not an offer of surrender. Not a demand for submission. It was a choice. To end it on her terms, before the king could take anything more from her. For a moment, The weight of everything pressed against her ribs, threatening to crush her. Her failure, her disgrace, the knowledge that she had been a puppet in a spectacle she had never controlled. If she took that hand, she would walk away alive but branded as broken. If she refused, the fight would continue, and there was no guarantee she would be able to rise again. But then she looked past the warrior, past the sand and the blood, and met the king's gaze. He wanted her to take it. That was all she needed. With the last remnants of her strength, she pivoted sharply and struck. Not at the warrior, but at his hand, knocking it aside. A refusal. A declaration. The crowd erupted into chaos, some screaming for her defeat, others stunned into silence. The king's face darkened. The warrior exhaled, a breath that was almost a sigh, then moved faster than she could react. His palms slammed into her chest, not a killing blow, but a force meant to end it. Her vision blurred as she was lifted off her feet and sent sprawling into the dust. For a moment, all was still. Then the final horn rang. It was over. The king rose, his expression carefully blank, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. She had lost, yes, but not in the way he had wanted. Not in the way he had orchestrated. She had not broken. As the alien warrior turned to leave, he glanced at her one final time. There was no victory in his expression. Only understanding. She lay there for a few seconds longer, feeling the roughness of the sand against her skin, the shallow rise and fall of her breath. The weight of her failure pressed down on her, but beneath it, there was something else.